Hi, Bruce here from S&S. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install the S&S Tappet Cuffs for Harley-Davidson Milwaukee 8 engines. The S&S Tappet Cuffs replace the stock anti-rotation brackets. As you can see, these anodized billet aluminum Tappet Cuffs are much more robust compared to the plastic stock parts. These plastic brackets may be okay for stock applications, but high-performance cams, heavier performance valve springs, and higher RPM put a lot more stress on the tappets. So we came up with a stronger part to keep your tappets aligned. We offer just the Tappet Cuffs by themselves, but we also offer them in a kit with a set of S&S Quickie pushrods and pushrod covers. Here are the tools you'll need: a Phillips screwdriver, a straight blade screwdriver, a 3/8" ratchet handle, an inch-pound torque wrench, 3/16" Allen socket, a 3/8" hex socket, a set of feeler gauges, a socket for the spark plugs, two 7/16" wrenches, one 1/4" wrench, blue thread locker, a motorcycle jack, and a bolt cutter. To save a lot of time, I'm going to simply cut the pushrods out of the engine with this bolt cutter. This saves a lot of work, which means a big savings in labor cost for you. A word of caution though, don't use a hacksaw or a whiz wheel to cut the pushrods. You'll generate abrasive particles that can flat out destroy your engine. First, as a safety precaution, I'm going to remove the ground cable from the battery just to make sure the starter can't be engaged. I'll jack up the rear tire of the bike, remove the spark plug so the engine will be easy to turn, and I'll shift the transmission into high gear so I can use the rear wheel to turn the engine. If your bike has a stock air cleaner on it, you will have to remove it, but this stealth air cleaner should allow us to work around it. I'm removing the pushrod cover keepers and using these high-tech retainers made from rubber bands and paper clips to hold the covers up. Before I start cutting pushrods, I'm going to use the rear wheel to turn the engine over until one cylinder is at TDC compression and the tappets are at the lowest point of travel. This is really important because it takes the tension from the valve springs off the pushrods. If you cut them with a spring tension on them, pushrod pieces can fly out and get you. I'm turning the engine while I watch the tappets and pushrods. Okay, the tappets for the front cylinder are both down, so I'll cut the front pushrods first. I could just as easily start with the rear cylinder. Just position the bolt cutter on the pushrod with the pushrod as close to the pivot as possible and squeeze. The front pushrods are out, so I'm turning the engine to get the rear cylinder tappets to their lowest point of travel. And I'm cutting the rear pushrods out just like I did with the front ones. So just like that, I have the stock pushrods out. If you were following the factory procedure for removing these pushrods, you wouldn't even have the rocker covers off yet. Remember, time is money, especially a mechanic's time. We won't be reusing the stock pushrod covers since the kit we're using includes a set of S&S covers that will collapse to a shorter length, giving me access to the pushrod adjusters so I can adjust the new S&S pushrods when I put this back together. However, we will reuse the caps, springs, and washers, so remove these parts from the stock pushrod covers and set them aside. Using a 3/16" Allen driver, I'm removing the tappet cover screws and removing the covers and gaskets. We'll be reusing the covers, hardware, and even the gaskets, so put them aside for later. The gaskets are pretty durable, so if you take a little care, you shouldn't damage them. If they are damaged, you'll have to get some new ones at your Harley dealer. I'll remove the mounting screws for the stock anti-rotation brackets with a 3/8" hex socket, and out they come. Save these mounting screws because we'll reuse them to mount the S&S Tappet Cuffs. I'm cleaning all the stock parts that I'm going to reuse, and I'm cleaning the S&S pushrods that I'll be installing. This is standard engine assembly practice. This thing is ready to go back together, but I'll just mention that if you need to change your tappets, this is the time to do it while all the covers are off. The S&S Tappet Cuffs are marked F and R for front and rear, so it's easy to know where they go. Install the Tappet Cuffs in the correct positions. I'll apply some blue thread locker to the stock mounting screws and install them, but I won't tighten them just yet. The torque spec on these bolts is 100 inch-pounds, so I'll set the torque wrench, but there's something I need to do before I tighten these screws. I'm inserting a 2/1000 inch feeler gauge between the tappet and the cuff. The cuff will tend to rotate slightly when I tighten the retaining screw, and the feeler gauge will keep it from touching the tappet and will provide adequate clearance between the tappet and the cuff. And now I'll tighten the mounting screws to 100 inch-pounds. Use the rear wheel to turn the engine at least 2 full rotations and watch the tappets to make sure they don't touch the tappet cuffs or bind in any way. As long as I'm turning the engine over, I've made sure that one cylinder is on TDC compression and the tappets are at their lowest point of travel so I can install the push rods. It doesn't matter which cylinder it is, but this time it happens to be the front cylinder. And now I'm going to reinstall the tappet covers. I'll start by applying blue thread locker to the 8 mounting screws. Place the gaskets on the crankcase and fit the covers in place. The gaskets are both the same, but the front and rear covers are different. Install the mounting screws and snug them up. The torque spec on these screws is 140 inch-pounds, and I'll need to switch to a 3/16 Allen socket. Use a crisscross pattern to tighten the tappet cover screws. The pushrod kit includes new O-rings for the tappet covers and rocker covers, and I'll install them now. The thickest ones go in the rocker covers, and the larger of the 2 thin O-rings goes in the tappet cover. To assemble the pushrod cover tubes, first apply a light coating of oil to the O-rings. Then slide the cover cap on the top of the tube like this, followed by the spring, the cover cap washer, and the O-ring. Then slide the top cover tube into the lower tube, and we're good to go. On each of the S&S Quickie pushrods, loosen the lock nut on the adjusting screw and turn the adjuster all the way until it slides up into the pushrod body. This makes the pushrods short enough to install in the engine. All the pushrod covers are the same and all the pushrods are the same length, so grab one of each and let's install it. Slide the pushrod tube over the pushrod, making sure the adjuster screw is toward the bottom. Take care not to let the nut slide down the adjuster screw while you're installing the pushrod. M8 tappet covers are really tall, and if the nut slides down in there, it's not easy to get it back up. If that happens, it might just be easiest to take the pushrod out and reinstall it. Place a 1/4 inch wrench on the adjuster with a lock nut above it. This will keep the adjuster from turning and keep the nut from sliding down the adjuster. Turn the pushrod to the right so that the adjuster threads re-engage and the adjuster screws out and just contacts the tappet. Start the lock nut on the threads of the adjuster. Put a 7/16 inch wrench on the hex portion of the pushrod itself and a 1/4 inch wrench on the adjuster screw, and turn the pushrod 24 flats to the right to lengthen the pushrod and depress the piston in the tappet. Run the lock nut up against the pushrod, holding the adjuster and the pushrod steady. Use another 7/16 inch wrench to tighten the lock nut against the pushrod. Repeat the installation and adjusting procedure on the other pushrod. Now we need to wait about 15 minutes to let the tappets bleed down. I'll check the pushrods to see if they're loose enough to turn between my fingers, indicating that the tappet has bled down. I can easily turn both of these so the tappets are bled down and it's safe to turn the engine over. So I'll extend the pushrod covers, making sure the top end is seated in the O-ring in the rocker cover and the bottom end is seated in the O-ring in the tappet cover. Then I install the S&S cover keepers included in the kit. So now I need to install the pushrods for the front cylinder. Since the tappet covers on M8 engines are taller than previous models, it may be helpful to have a helper watch the tappets to determine if they're both all the way down. If you don't have a helper available, here's an easy trick. Put something in the tappet holes so you can see where they are. Since I've just cut the ends off the stock pushrods, I'll use the short ends of those. I'm turning the engine until the front cylinder is at TDC compression and the tappets are at the lowest point of travel, so I can install and adjust the pushrods for the front cylinder. Everything is good, so I'll close up the pushrod covers just like I did with the rear cylinder. I just have to replace the spark plugs and the battery ground cable, and this bike is ready to go. We hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to see all the latest S&S videos as soon as they're released, subscribe to the S&S channel by clicking on the subscribe button below the viewer. Thanks for watching.